What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to a very, very special episode of Attack on Cowboys. Now, y'all know I love to bring people on the platform whose opinion and influence within the community we really appreciate. And I feel like your influence, Mr. Nick Harris, your opinions that you share, and just the way you go about your business, how you do your reporting, I just want to let you know, man, it's a healthy way to do things, to be objective in your job, but also understand that, hey, man, at the end of the day, you are dealing with fans of a team and you don't want to kind of beat down on them. So Nick Harris, thank you for joining us on Attack on Cowboys. Go ahead, let the audience know a little bit about yourself, my brother.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, man, and thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I've been on the Cowboys beat for a few years now, and getting ready for this draft cycle. It's going to be my third draft around, and it's kind of crazy. My first day on the beat was 2 years ago, the first day of the draft when they drafted Mozzie Smith. So me and Mozzie Smith came in on the same day. I don't know. Y'all tell me who's had a better 2-year jump.
I was about to say, Mozzie need to take some tips from you, man, because you've been killing it. You've been killing it. You've been moving up the ladder and showing your worth, brother. No, seriously, though, you've been showing your worth. And on a serious note, like you say, because you worked with DallasCowboys.com initially, right, before you moved to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, right? Yeah. Brother, I can say this. I'm very critical because this is kind of a brief description of what my platform is for, bro. Yeah. I'm here to course correct the psyche of the Dallas Cowboys fan. Because are you a Cowboys fan?
So my family grew up Cowboys fans. I always grew up an NFL fan. That's just kind of who I am at the end of the day. Yeah.
So from an outside perspective, you'll understand what I'm talking about, right? When you look at Cowboys fans, man, it's like we hate our team more than we love to cheer our team on. And I absolutely hate that. And it's like, no matter what it is, no matter how people report on the Cowboys, the opinions they share, how they choose to go about being a fan of the team is always from a glass half full, half empty perspective versus looking at it from a glass half full perspective. And it's like, bro, that affects people. And when you have a position of influence like yourself, and a lot of people flock to your content, they engage with a lot of your stuff that you do. You put out great reports. You're sitting there in the trenches with the Joneses. You're talking to the people. I love the way that you don't inject too much of your own personal feelings into how you disseminate information to the audience. So I just want you to know I really appreciate that, and it's observed.
I appreciate that.
Observed.
That's definitely intentional, just because I see that too. Not even necessarily in this market, but in other markets too. It's like, okay, where do we find that line between feelings and facts, right? And that's always something that I want to make sure that I have a straight line about. And I give credit to my mentors and the people that came before me for giving me that.
Absolutely, brother. Speaking of feelings and facts, let's talk about some of the feelings and facts involved with what's been going on with the Cowboys this offseason. Because I've been making a strong argument, essentially since the Brian Schottenheimer press conference. I fashioned myself as a very good reader of people. I've grown up in a leadership environment. Father was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and that's just been the structure of my life. I've always been an observer. Brian Schottenheimer came off as very genuine. He came off as very passionate. He came off as very intentional. He came off as if he had a plan. And since that moment, I said, okay, the Cowboys, they have something here. Now it's about, does the rest of the organization follow suit? And I seen an interview, I think it might have been something Will McClay talked about as far as, where Brian Schottenheimer actually said everybody being on the same page from the front office down. Everyone being on the same page. Do you feel a different vibe just being in the trenches, being around the star, being around the people involved, just the actual people themselves? Do you feel a different type of energy kind of flowing at the star right now behind what's happening?
Yeah, 100,000%. It's not only started from the front office all the way down to the coaching staff, but it's down to team employees. It's down to training staff. It's down to cafeteria workers. I mean, one of the first things that Brian Schottenheimer did after he got the job was he got anybody that's involved with the team, whether it be coaches, trainers, nutritionists, whatever that are in the building, got them in the team meeting room, right? And talk to them all about, that alignment from top to bottom. Hey, we're all in this thing together. We all got to be together. If y'all have questions for me, come to me. I'm not too big or too, overpowering to tell you to go away or anything. And then at the end of the meeting, he said, everybody go find somebody that you do not know and introduce yourself, meet that person. And they did. And it's definitely helped with chemistry in that building. And he's not all talk. He is truly about it when it comes to being a people person, wanting to get people engaged. However, the question we have, it's all great off the field. He is going to be an A+ hire off the field. What does it look like on the field? And that's going to be the big thing that he's going to have to prove early and often, because you have to ask yourself, how big is his leash? He is a former coordinator. He came from inside the building. Is this something that, Jerry Jones is going to allow him to have some growing pains with? Or if this season starts really rocky, do we start looking around and start talking about a hot seat? Who knows?
Ooh.
I do wonder how short or long the Brian Schottenheimer leash is. But I will say, and this is just kind of going for sports across the board, you can look at this in any sport, any level. Typically, the better people at the end of the day, who they are off the field, gives them a longer leash in the end. You can look at many different examples of people that maybe stuck around their jobs a little too long. And when you kind of, try to figure out why, it's like they were a good person behind the building. They inspired confidence at the end of the day. It just never worked out on the field or on the court or whatever. I think I'm not sitting here saying like Brian Schottenheimer 1 year is going to be on the hot seat. But I do wonder about, okay, if things go bad, how does ownership react to that? What are some of the comments we get from them? What are some of the comments we get from the fan base even? Is the fan base going to turn on them if the season goes sour?
Man, they've already turned on him, Nick. I mean, we know the answer to that question, Nick. They've turned on that man already.
That's fair.
They waiting on Shotty to miss. So they're like, oh, look, he should have called a timeout there. Terrible hire.
Yep, exactly. Clock management, third down situational stuff. He will have a big microscope. I mean, that is one of the things about this hire that I honestly, I'll commend Jerry Jones for, because it's ballsy in the sense that every single detail about Brian Schottenheimer and what he does is going to be heavily scrutinized and detailed, way more than if it was a Pete Carroll or a Bill Belichick or whoever else who was on the open market, right? Because, like, let's say that
I don't know, Nick. You seen Bill Belichick's significant other on the field? Man. Could you imagine how that turns out in Dallas, man? You see her walking around the practice field with a heel. These boots ain't made for walking on the turf. Oh,
she wouldn't even have a badge in that building. There's no way. There's no way. But man, I saw that. That was the first thing I thought of. I was like, ooh. Never imagine that in Frisco. It would never happen.
But go ahead, man. Keep cooking.
But with some of those other guys, let's say it's Pete Carroll starting the season 3-6, right? And it's Brian Schottenheimer starting the season 3-6. There's going to be a different opinion about both of those guys, and so I wonder what it'll look like if things don't go right for Schottenheimer early on. But also on the flip side, I wonder what it'll look like if things go right, and how much credit will he get at the end of the day for those things. It's going to be a fascinating year, man. Regardless of what happens, it's going to be a fascinating year one.
As far as the credit, I'm telling you right now, I seen the odds on Coach of the Year. We're not going to talk about it because anybody paying me to talk about it right now. But I see the odds on Coach of the Year, and I would take them odds for Shotty, brother, because I think this thing is like built. It is ready-made, built for him. If they make a couple of good moves, like even a couple of, because honestly, we're going to take a look at the roster in just a second. Honestly, I don't think this team is in nearly as bad a shape as what people think based off the season we had last year. I think what you saw was the Cowboys lose the battle of attrition last year, and it killed them. Yep. This season, I think they addressed that issue by going after the depth, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, because you did mention that it all sounds good. It all sounds fine and dandy when we're talking about it. We're looking at them doing the hoorah stuff. We're seeing them go to Michael Parsons' charity event and being out there with the guys and different defensive coaches on the staff going to different events for these guys and stuff. So that feeling of family is starting to be embedded in this team. But what I like about what Schottenheimer said in free agency is the way they've gone about handpicking the guys. I don't know if you've even paid attention to this. The Cowboys are a 6-foot-and-up club at this point, Nick.
Yeah.
They're not going and getting these small, diminutive guys that could be used as hybrids or have these very specific niche skill sets. They're going to get guys whose bodies are built for the positions that they play, and maybe even a little bit more built, right? They're going to get the 6'5", 6'6" Peyton Turners. They're going to get the 6'2" Kyer Elam. They're going to get all these guys that are a certain build. And I like the fact that what Schottenheimer said about how he wanted to build this team, you could see that reflected through the moves. And to your point about how much leash Jerry them will give him, I think they give him 4 years worth of leash. Jerry doesn't fire coaches. He doesn't fire coaches early on in the contract cycle because, for one, Jerry don't like paying a lot of people for we could pay one person to do, right? That's part of it. Let's be real. He don't want to be paying 2 coaches. But he's not going to fire Brian Schottenheimer that early. I think this year is a develop and evaluate type of season. I think the entire coaching staff was built because they all have a specialty of being great player developers. And I think this season is going to be about seeing what that coaching staff can do with the pieces that they have while adding a few more pieces here and there. what do you think about what they've done in free agency? And I'm going to go ahead and pull this up so we can actually take a look at this.
Appreciate
This
that.
is everything that they've done in free agency so far.
Yeah, from what I see is it's addressing depth, and you kind of hit on that, right? It's that attrition battle that they faced last year and all the injuries that hit at multiple position groups. I mean, you look at how many corners they played last year, how many linebackers they played down the stretch. The quarterback position. I mean, it hit every single position group, and so going out and addressing almost every single one of those positions. The position group that stood out to me most, I think, during free agency was defensive line. Going out and getting the Dante Fowler and giving him that deal, going and getting a Peyton Turner, going and getting a Solomon Thomas. They wanted to get experience on that defensive front. And, I was curious what they were going to do heading into free agency as far as, okay, are we going to dedicate resources in free agency to this position group or this position group, or are we going to wait until the draft with this position group or this position group? Right. And you see defensive line, they're like, hey, there's some really good defensive line guys. Let's go get these guys. Let's get this experience in the building. We're okay with sitting back on that in the draft if we have to. And you've seen, the dedication of resources since then to defensive line prospects. It's kind of gone down a little bit. So, I wish they did a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. I wish they did a lot more on the offensive side of the ball. But what they did for Matt Eberflus and his group on the defensive side, they have given him depth. They need help at corner, do not get me wrong, but they've given him depth at other spots, and it allows them to focus on that corner issue solely going into the draft without having to fill multiple spots. Now, granted, they need another one tech. They could use another linebacker until Overshown's healthy. You're not going to be 100%, good in the depth department, but they have gotten themselves within range of being able to address these positions in the draft. Whereas, we were going into the draft last year, we're like, how the hell are they going to fill 15 spots? So I think this year they've set them up a little bit nicer.
I think if you actually take a look at it, and I just pulled up their prospective depth chart. This is all from ESPN, by the way. But I just put their prospective depth chart right now, right? And what I've been doing is doing an exercise because I don't want to overstate the issues that the team has. I don't want to overstate how many holes this team has because, quite frankly, I think this may be the linebacker room I've liked the best in a decade, Nick. Seriously, when you put DeMarvion Overshown back into this linebacker room, you're looking at Demo, Maris Leofau, Jack Sanborn, who I think is a guy. I think he's a guy. Chicago Bears fans were devastated to lose that man because he's one of those dudes that can easily turn into what's the bald-headed dude from the Eagles? I try not to remember none of their names. Zach Bond. I don't like none of them dudes. You wearing that doo-doo green right now too.
My bad.
But I think that he has those type of intangibles, right? Not saying he's going to play up to that level. I'm not hyping him up to that level. I'm saying he can be that type of impact for you. Kenneth Murray Jr., this is a first-round talent, and a lot of people had him evaluated as such. So it's not like he's just a reach from the Titans. This is a guy that people had high hopes on. So the linebacker room, I really like. You look at the defensive ends. Do they really need to do – any other defensive end you add to this is just honestly cherry on the top.
Agreed, yeah.
Because, you got Sam Williams, Micah Parsons, Marshawn Nealon, Dante Fowler. Peyton Turner was a third overall pick, y'all. I know he didn't pan out with the Saints, but, coaching is a part of this, and he has the traits at least. So we'll see if they can get anything out of him. If they can get anything out of him that lives up to that first-round bill, I like it. I like the Peyton Turner pickup. The defensive ends are fine. I think defensive tackle, like you said, you need a one tech. That's a clear hole that I think that you cannot go into the season. You need a guy that can play that one tech, or depending on what kind of front you're using, they can play a zero. You need a big fat back. I'm sorry, you need one of those dudes. So one tech is a position of need. I would say cornerback 100%. You need an outside corner. I like kind of giving Izzy a chance possibly to play that nickel position unless you draft a guy to go there. But an outside corner, maybe a Jalen Ramsey, maybe a Jair Alexander. I think Jair Alexander would be a little bit more palatable from a financial standpoint. But I like corner as another position. But that's the three positions I see on the defense that really need to be filled.
Yeah, you could make the case for just one more linebacker just for depth purposes strictly because you won't have Overshown. You're expecting not to have Overshown back until midseason. And, if one of those guys goes down before then you're turning to a Damone Clark or a Buddy Johnson or a Darius Harris to fill that role.
Right.
It would make sense on day 3 to go get you a linebacker that can be there, that can be that developmental project, and who knows, could turn into something if you pick the right guy. But, I'm with you. One tech, you need 2 corners in my opinion. If they double dip.
Wouldn't be mad at it.
I wouldn't be mad at it either. I mean, we saw what Andrew Booth Jr. had last year. We saw what Troy Pride Jr.
Hey, Andrew Booth Jr. was out there breakdancing like Ray Gun, wasn't he, at the Olympics?
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And we saw that in the preseason game against Vegas. And I was like, man, whenever he first got that first start, I was like, this is going to be a roller coaster ride with not a lot of ups. So,
oh my goodness.
But yeah, Kyer Elam, I don't think he's a guy that can step in and start for you 17 games. I mean, that's the hope, right? But I don't realistically, I don't think that's the case. You know, he lost his job early in Buffalo and never earned it back. If at the worst case, he's a guy that fills in until Trayvon Diggs is healthy. At the best case, he's a guy that, you know, maybe could give you some spots starting at different times. But they need 2 corners in the draft.
Real quick, this is your personal opinion.
Yeah,
I've been of the thought process. I'm looking at how the cap is shaking out, and I just don't believe the Cowboys are going to invest a certain amount of capital to a specific position. And I think that, I'm really under the belief that this may be Trayvon Diggs' last season with Dallas. What is your thought about that idea?
Yeah, I don't think it's outstretched by any means. You look at his health and what he's had to overcome these last 2 off seasons now. Yeah. This will be the second off season in a row that he has not been a part of off season workouts because he's been rehabbing. They're kind of in a situation now where they have to plan for Trayvon Diggs never being healthy again. Now, he probably will be during the season next year. You probably get him back, and who knows, maybe he comes back to 100%. But you're at the point now where you have to plan for the event that he's not. Yeah. And if you're already planning for the event that he's not, that means his leash is a lot shorter too. And if one of these rookies comes over and is able to, you know, overtake his spot, if they go and get a guy on day 2 like a Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, and he's healthier option, he's the guy that's more reliable, and he's giving you better play too, then I don't think you're that far off, AOC.
Yeah. I mean, that right there, I mean, I hope the best for all of our guys, obviously, man. Once they put that star in their helmet, all of my personal opinions and what I think goes out the door. I'm not one of those people that will sit here and root against the player just so I can be right. I love to be wrong if it means our Cowboys are doing good things. So I hope Trayvon Diggs can return to that form, but just being realistic and looking at the financial implications, because they have to pay DaRon Bland. And I don't see them dedicating 20% of their salary cap to 2 cornerbacks.
Yeah.
I don't think that's feasible to do. But I'm with you. So 2 corners, a 1 tech, and a linebacker for depth maybe on day 3. And I think that you will be fine rolling the dice and see what Eberflus can do with the rest of these guys. I mean, even if one of your safeties aren't playing up to snuff, man, you have good safety depth to where you can see if Wanye can be that guy. You can see what a Marquise Bell can do for you, right? So I like the defense. Now, the offense, the offense is the one that we really need to take a wrecking ball to, because now I will say I am not one of these O-line people. I want to get your thoughts on that right now. How do you feel about let's draft O-line? Draft O-line.
Yeah, I think they do need to draft an O-lineman. You need to draft
in the first?
No. They need to draft an offensive lineman in every draft. I mean, that's just the case of the NFL. But drafting one in the first round for the Cowboys right now probably doesn't make the most sense. I mean, unless the board is completely wiped out at 12 and you're left with Armand Membu out of Missouri. Damn good player. He probably has some inside versatility and would be able to start for you week 1 at right guard. Then maybe, but you could still make the case that there's other positions out there with better players that could provide you more of an immediate impact. But that right guard spot is the one. That's the one for me. I do believe Brock Hoffman is capable of being a 17-game starter, but I'm hesitant on really stamping that because we haven't seen it, right? I mean, we did see the games that he had down the stretch last year. He started the final 2 months of the season. I can really only think of 2 games off the top of my head where I was like, ugh. It was Tampa Bay and what was the Philadelphia game, the next to last one.
Yeah,
those games, it was a little rough. But you look at the Cincinnati game, you look at the last game against Washington, both games against Washington, actually. He was bullying guys, bulldozing
guys. Yep.
He's a locker room guy. He's heavily liked in that offensive line room. He's going to get a legitimate shot at starting here at right guard. But you have to prepare for the sense that he might just be best as a 6-man, and that's okay, you know, and you rock with that. But they do need to go draft a guy to throw competition into that right guard spot. They picked up Sadiq Charles last week to throw competition to the interior room. I think the more competition you have in the interior offensive line, I think the better you're going to end up being on the other side. And the one big question I have is Tyler Guyton ready to do it in year 2? Is he ready to take that step?
He need to get a gut, man. I need to give Tyler Guyton some of my belly because I'm serious, man. Because I seen him walking into the building, that clip yesterday, and I'm like, yo, he looks like he's a basketball power forward. Like he doesn't have the body of like a meat and potatoes. I'm gonna be able to anchor down and sit my ass in the ground and keep this guy from killing my core. Like that bothers me from seeing that from a left tackle. Even Tyron Smith, he wasn't a body fat guy, but Tyron Smith was bulky. Like he was yoked. He was a big dude. And Tyler Guyton, man, he needs to put some peanut butter in his protein shakes or something. I'm serious.
It's funny you say that he looks like a basketball player because I said throughout the year last year, I was like, he's got a basketball player's body and he's playing left tackle. And he was a basketball player up until his senior year of high school. I mean, that's what he grew up playing. That's what he grew up developing in. You see that in his footwork at times, but I think you also see the lack of experience when it comes to being at the point of attack against guys and really being able to go against some of these bigger, stronger, more powerful rushers. You know, you think about guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Trey Hendrickson that he had issues with at times last year. And you think about the power that he has to go up against in some of these situations. But
that's why I think it's important that we're moving to – I think that pin and pull action that Clayton Adams really loves using a lot of, and just how they're going to be using that offensive line in a more lateral way this season, just based off of all the guys they brought in. I mean, that's in all of their toolkits. I think that's going to help Tyler Guyton a little bit because instead of having to anchor down and go heads up with these guys, now you're getting the pass rushers moving laterally across the line of scrimmage. Now you're able to pull TG to the other side and not getting him in them situations where he's having to go strength for strength. Because I don't think he's going to beat many guys strength for strength. Just in this league right now, how he's built, I don't see that.
When Clayton Adams was hired, the first guy that I thought of was like, oh, man, this is going to be huge for his development is Terrence Steele. I think this is going to be huge for Terrence Steele. That was the best hire that could have been made because if they went with a guy that had similar philosophy, similar gap scheme ideas as Mike Solari did last year, then you were probably looking at a situation where Terrence Steele's another one of those cap casualties this time next year. But you get a guy in with a pin and pull action, with a lot of more man scheme type stuff, and being able to just dedicate to an assignment pre-snap. This is going to really benefit Terrence Steele. It's going to be able to maximize his athleticism. It's going to be able to maximize his impact in the run game too. I think Terrence Steele probably just bought 3 more years with this team with Clayton Adams being hired. Maybe that's a little exaggerated, but I truly
I don't think it's an exaggeration. I mean, if you look at this thing, and I brought the offensive line the first round thing up because people keep going, you got to build the trenches. I'm like, brothers, we have literally 14 offensive linemen on this roster right now. Like, literally, there's 14 of these guys, and about 8 of them are possibly starting level quality players.
Yeah,
Robert Jones, Sadiq Charles, those are starting quality guys. They were starting for their previous team. Matter of fact, Robert Jones was looked at as one of the better offensive linemen for the Dolphins before this last season. When he started battling some injuries, he was looked at as one of the better pieces on their offensive line. Sadiq Charles has been a starter and was about to be a starter for the Titans before he just retired, so I hope his mental's cool. Akeem Richards, I've seen a lot out of him that I'm like, we need to see what we have in some of these dudes. So I'm not trying to invest early in the offensive line. I think the offensive line is fine. Obviously, don't need a fullback. I honestly think the tight end room is fine because they like a lot of those guys. They like Brevin Spanford. They like Jake Ferguson. Luke Schoonmaker showed some progress last season. They brought that tight end coach back, so it's not like you're going to look at London. He's going to be like, I can't work with these guys, right? He's going to want most of the guys back. So tight end, I'm fine at. It's the receiver and the running back. You got to get a 2, and you got to get a running back that you feel like can really be a 3-down guy if you need him to be.
Yeah, I agree. And for a 2 at receiver, I think you need a possession guy. You need a red zone guy. I mean, this team the last 2 years, you can even look back to 2023 when they were rolling offensively. There were so many issues that they had inside the 20 and just trying to punch it into the end zone. And you can look at it specifically from the 10 to 15 yard range. Look how many touchdowns they score between the 10 to 15 yard range. It's not very many. It's because they don't really have those guys that can go up and get it. Mike McCarthy, I'll give him credit. He was able to utilize Brandon Cooks in a role out of the slot where he was able to, isolate on a DB and create some separation on a corner route. And that happened multiple times in the red zone. That became like a red zone threat. But then you lose Brandon Cooks because of health last year. And then you're starting to look around. It's like, okay, what can we do in the red zone? And it's tough. They need a guy that they can just throw it up to, rely upon, that can turn 50-50 balls into 80-20 balls. They haven't had that since Des Bryant. And
I know where you're going. I know where you're leaning. I might as well pull this up now then since we're getting into it. So let's say, hold on, wrong one. Let's say the draft falls this way, right? And this is the ESPN analytic data driven model right here. So this is going to be one of the more accurate type of drafts that you're going to see because it's based off all the analytics ESPN is using. But let's say it falls like this, right? And let me move this out the way so you can see. Let's say it falls like this, and this is what you have left on the board if you're the Cowboys. What is your decision, GM Jerry? GM Jerry Harris. What's your decision here?
Yeah, this is a slam dunk for me. Teteroa McMillan is a top 5 player on my board. I think this is Michael Thomas. I think he's going to have that type of impact.
I like that comp. I like that comp a lot more than some of the other comps I've heard. I like that comp.
I think he's going to have that type of impact in the NFL, and you put him on this team with a CeeDee Lamb, it's going to be fun. And here's something I think is interesting too about McMillan. Let's look at some of the other top receivers on the board. You got Matthew Golden, you have Emeka Egbuka, you have Luther Burden, right? Granted, all three of those guys, you figure out how to work them in with CeeDee Lamb, and it'll be a dangerous duo, but that's going to be a really complex situation to figure out. With Teteroa McMillan, he walks in day one. You know what CeeDee Lamb's role is, and you know what McMillan's role is. And that's going to be pretty easy to decipher early on. It's like, hey, you just go up and grab some things. We'll work you in all three levels. Don't get me wrong, but you're going to stay on the outside, be that guy. And CeeDee, we're going to try to isolate him and create some opportunities for him until it opens up opportunities for you, and they just feed off each other in that way. I think it would just be able to create so many dangerous route combinations with those two guys. You factor in the size, you factor in the speed that he has. It's not a crazy blazing speed, but that 4.5 speed at 6'5", it looks blazing when it's downfield. I'll tell you that. And with CeeDee Lamb, I think would be one of the more dangerous receiver combos in the NFL.
I think that he would definitely satisfy the need for having a real red zone target, a true jump ball guy that's not making it a 50-50 ball. It's more like a 60-40 or 70-30 ball with a Teteroa McMillan. And I think that would take a ton of attention off of a CeeDee Lamb, especially when you do get into that red area or even approaching the fringe. That would really take a lot of attention off of a CeeDee Lamb. And you know what? Maybe it's draft fatigue, man, or sometimes you watch a guy's film too many times, but man, I sat there and watched all of Ted's games last season, all of his targets, all of his receptions and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's times where his smoothness with how he runs his routes does come off as like he's not engaged.
Yeah.
And there's times on film where you can tell it's like, man, some of these big games he had, like the one he had like almost 300 yards receiving, man, those were just a bunch of bad DBs on the field, Nick.
Yeah, he was playing New Mexico.
Yeah, it was a bunch of bad. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And then you start seeing him play some comp, and it's like, okay, these guys are like on his hip the whole time. So it's like he's not really separating in college unless the DB turns his hips the wrong way on the release or he slips on his or whatever he's doing on his back pedal. But Ted, I love Ted. I love Ted. I think that would be a slam. I can't be mad at that. I can't be mad at that, man. I wouldn't be mad at it.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I think that is one very valid thing to bring up whenever you talk about negatives with Ted McMillan is like, okay, does he play to his level of comp at times? Not necessarily against New Mexico, but does he play down to like a Kansas or Kansas secondary last year? Let me think of a bad secondary in the Big 12. Baylor. Does he play down to like a Baylor type situation or a Texas Tech, right? And does he play up to more bigger competition? I see it last year specifically, a situation at Arizona in Arizona's offense where nobody looked comfortable throughout the season. They had a coach going into 24, and there was a lot of moving pieces throughout the year. They had their running back for a couple games, and then the running back was taken out because of ineligibility. They had a factored-in run game that just got completely ripped away from them right before conference play started. When you look at 23 with McMillan, you don't see those concerns. You see comfortability. And if you can get McMillan comfortable in an offense, which I think this one he would be comfortable in pretty early on because he would have a defined role with an offensive play caller as your head coach, I think you would find success with McMillan early on.
Oh, I like that. You know what? You'd have made me more comfortable with Ted. You'd have made me more. I mean, I love Ted already, but I think that there's some of the. I don't believe that Ted's like this perennial all-pro Pro Bowler type of guy. I don't. I think he's a guy that's going to make the Pro Bowl maybe 2 or 3 times in his career. Maybe have a season where he's like an all-pro type, maybe one time. Yep. But I just don't know if he's the type to where, to me, this draft is one that's lacking on franchise-changing guys. I think you have a bunch of NFL starters. I think you have a bunch of solid NFL starting quality guys in this draft. but I don't think you have a bunch of franchise shifting, changing guys in this draft. Even in the top 10, there's not many of those guys that you look at and you're like, oh, this is going to completely change the fortunes of this franchise. You just don't see that in this draft. But I think for the Cowboys, with their receiver room, though, how does that affect other guys? Because I'm of the thought that you have Mingo. I know they're going to use Mingo. They wanted to use Mingo last year. Mike didn't trust playing him because he didn't have time to learn the playbook and all that other stuff. But they're going to play Mingo. Where does Mingo fit in? Are they going to use Turpin as a receiver? You know, like, how are they going to use the guys they currently have? How many of the guys they currently have on the roster right now are going to stay? Is Jalen Brooks one of those guys that's like, hey, you know, you're liked around the building, but
yeah. Him and Ryan Flanoy. You're starting to look around at both those two guys. If they draft a receiver in the first round, you're like, man, you're gonna have a hell of a camp, big dog. And you know, I still feel like they have great talent on their practice squad. Even you look at like a Jalen Cropper, he's never gotten an opportunity, and that's a decent player. I feel like probably 20 other NFL teams, he'd be on a 53-man roster. So it's like that receiver room. There's a bunch of Jags, and there's no problems with having Jags. Just a guy. There's no problem with having those guys on your roster. But when they make up the entirety of your depth, then you have an average team. Yeah, and then you're starting to come below expectations. And then when your dude, CeeDee Lamb, is out for the last 3 games of the season and you're just relying on those Jags, it doesn't work out for you. And so, you know, I feel like all those guys have had their opportunity to really put it forth and shine, except for Mingo. Mingo's probably the one exception there. And it's going to be this rookie coming in and saying, hey, you know, I'm here for your job, and if I get it a week into camp or 2 weeks into the season, then that's how it's going to be.
Okay. So on that note, real quick, I'm getting probably like 2 or 3 more questions. All right. So with Mingo, okay, with the Cowboys receivers in general, name me 3 guys that you for sure would like in this draft at the receiver position. Like if any one of those 3 guys landed with the Cowboys, is based off of what you've been watching, what you've been looking at. Name me 3 guys that you just really, really like.
Oh man, let's McMillan. I mean, McMillan's an easy one. I think Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State would be a fascinating combination with CeeDee Lamb for a couple of reasons. One, he's versatile. He can play that inside and out. He can be that compact slot that can get you those dirty yards from 0 to 15 yards. But he can also line up on the outside and take your top off of a defense if he needs to. He's got that type of speed. It's not a home run breakaway speed or the fastest in this class, but I like what he brings in that department. And also, he has played second fiddle his entire career at Ohio State, and he walks out of Columbus as the program's career receptions leader. And so you're throwing him into an offense where you're expecting him to be the number 2 option, and he's already accustomed to doing that. He knows how to play the second fiddle. He knows how to get in where he fits in, and he also knows how to open up opportunities for the number 1 guy. There's a lot of IQ involved with that in the receiving core that I think is undervalued when it comes to Emeka Egbuka's evaluation. That's a guy that I feel like is a top 20 type of pick. And if Golden and McMillan are off the board, it wouldn't be outstretched in my eyes for the Cowboys to swing on him at 12. It really wouldn't.
So Steven actually brought up that they're more likely to trade back right now. Like, they like what's going on with the board, where they are. And he said on today on 105.3 The Fan, he said that if anything, they would be looking to trade back. And to me, you don't trade back. I think if they trade back, that would be a huge indication that they're going offense. Because I think at 12, you would have your pick essentially of one of the best defensive players at a few different positions at 12, right? If you trade back, to me, you're trying to get Emeka Egbuka. I think you're going for an Emeka Egbuka type or someone else that's already going off the board because the draft fell something like this. The draft looked something like that, to where you see, you know, some of these guys gone, Tech gone, maybe one of them teams take Matthew Golden. But I guess the question is, how comfortable would you be? Like, how far back would you be comfortable trading to where you feel like you can still get one of the guys that you really want?
I am team trade back. I think it makes sense to trade back in almost every single draft. There are 2 spots that I think make sense, 18 and 20, because Seattle and Denver have those extra day 2 picks that they could work with to send off. But you're not going to be the only team looking to trade back too. I think that you're going to have a lot of teams in that range that are looking to parachute back and get some value. So you might not have a tango partner, but if you're asking me the furthest I would go back, man, I would go back to like 24, 25. I really would.
You still think you can get a Mecca there?
Not necessarily a Mecca, but I think you could go get your Marion Hampton there in that range. and then you can go get your corner in the second round, receiver in the third, or however it may fall, receiver in the second, corner in the third. You'd be taking some chances, don't get me wrong, but you'd also be picking capital. You'd have more opportunities to hit on those chances on day 2. But if you're asking me, I would probably stick at 12. But if you're also asking, hey, where would you parachute back? I would parachute back to maybe that range.
Okay. I think that I'm comfortable probably going as far back as like a 20, 21. If Pittsburgh is really horny for Shedeur, and they're like, yeah, we like Shedeur. If they're really horny and they want to trade up and give us a second or a third to get up to 12 from 21, I wouldn't be mad at that at all. And I think you could still probably get the same level of a guy that you would have got at 12. Now, Ted would have to be off the board already. For me to want to trade back, Roy McMillan would have to be off the board already. Matthew Golden may have to already be off the board already, because while I do think we need a possession receiver, I do want some explosion added to this offense. One of the biggest issues with this offense has been having to see Dak thread the needle over and over and over again and throw the perfect ball in the perfect location because his guys have half of yard of separation on the field. I'm tired of seeing that. So I think a guy like a Matthew Gold would take the top off, make the safeties respect his side of the field, and open up CD. Tyler Warren, I think, would kind of satisfy that need of having a red zone target, also a guy that can help you between the 20. So the NFL draft, I think, is wide open for the Cowboys. They really can't mess it up unless they're trying to, Nick. I mean, I think that's what we can take from this. They can't mess this one up unless they're trying to. And I think the only way you can mess it up is by taking an offensive lineman in the first round. I would lose my lunch for that.
Yeah, but it would be tough for content purposes, too, because, look, man, last year at training camp, we're looking around. There's no CD Lamb. Our first-round pick is an offensive lineman. Everybody's getting hurt. And by the end of camp, we're getting like 2 retweets on touchdown passes. And it's like, man, so next year we need a Teteroa McMillan or a Matthew Golden to come in here. We need some content, baby. Ashton Gypsy, straight up.
John been campaigning for Travis Hunter. John's like, I need Travis Hunter. That would be amazing for content.
Me and John have talked about that. It was like, if Travis Hunter happens, we are throwing a party at the Star that night, only for content purposes, because we know we just gained 20,000 followers or however much.
No, for real. Speaking of followers, man, Nick, appreciate you taking out this 30 minutes of your day, brother. Be sure to follow Nick Harris on X at Nick Harris, Fort Worth Star Telegram, FWST on X, and you'll be able to find his link to all his other stuff. And he posts all his articles and all the great work that the great Nick Harris does. Nick, this was fun, man. It breezed by. We got to do it again. Now we've acquainted with each other. We had to do it again, brother.
Anytime, you hit me. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you coming in, brother. And y'all know how we always end these months. How about them Cowboys?
Calling me, texting me, paging me, asking me, am I still them boy? Y'all usually check on me. Listen. I'm still them boys. Hey! Woo! Hey! I'm still them boys.